Hi, my name is Dinin, and I have an incurable disease that could kill me before I'm able to finish this talk. Since I've realized I don't look sick, I'm going to use this time to explain how someone who looks perfectly healthy could actually have a disease capable of killing them in the next 15 minutes. I bet you didn't realize a TED Talk could get so dramatic. So in order to do this, we're going to have to travel back in time to November 1st, 2015. That is the day I became a father. This is the picture of the first time I held my daughter, Adeline. I'm going to share her story, but before I do that, I got to tell you a little more about the person holding her. If I'm being honest, he was a real idiot. He didn't think he was an idiot. He thought he was successful. He was an entrepreneur building venture-backed tech companies. Those are the ones you read about in the news. Young go-getter raises millions of dollars to try to build a world-changing technology that he goes on to sell for billions of dollars. I had not accomplished that yet, but by the time this picture was taken, I at least felt like I was on my way. I was running a fast-growing startup, and I'd even just raised another large round of funding for it. And I don't say any of that to brag. If anything, I actually think it made me even more of an idiot because it made me think I knew and understood everything that mattered in this world. The joke was on me because I didn't even know that little girl in my arms was experiencing an irregular heartbeat, an arrhythmia that was trying to kill her. Now, to be fair, I wasn't the only person who didn't figure this out. The doctors, it took them a few hours to hear the arrhythmia. And when they did, they told my wife and I it was nothing really to worry about. The way they explained it was that newborns sometimes have to adjust to life outside of the womb. No big deal, but just to be on the safe side, they wanted to send her to a bigger hospital where they could keep a closer eye on her until she stabilized. So they put her in the back of an ambulance, sent her across town to Duke University Hospital. My wife couldn't go with our daughter because childbirth. So it was like the first fatherhood thing I had to do on my own. So I get in my car by myself, and I drive over to meet my daughter. And on my way, I remember stopping for a Bojangles chicken biscuit because I was hungry, and the doctor said there was nothing to worry about, and let's not forget that I was an enormous idiot. So I get over to Duke University Hospital. I make my way to the neonatal intensive care unit, the NICU. I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I'm texting adorable baby pictures to friends and families, and I'm eating this delicious chicken biscuit. And they call me in the back to go be with my daughter. And as I'm walking through the NICU, I'm passing all these tiny little preemie babies in these big, terrifying-looking machines keeping them alive. And there in the back of the NICU, looking totally out of place, is my big, full-term, healthy-looking 8-pound-something-ounce baby girl. And she's sitting in this simple bassinet, and she's sucking on this neon orange pacifier. Every time I see that picture of the pacifier, it just reminds me of what an idiot I was, because I feel like anyone else in this scenario would have been a little worried, but not me. I was a world-beating entrepreneur who could control any situation, so I very confidently walk up to the concerned-looking nurses and doctors standing around my daughter, and I say, "Excuse me. My wife and I don't want our daughter using a pacifier, based on what we've read. Could hurt her ability to learn to breastfeed properly." There I am, I'm like a father for less than one day, and in my head, I'm winning Father of the Year awards. And this doctor steps forward, and he very kindly, maybe more kindly than I deserved, he said, "We understand that, Mr. Dinin. Right now, we're focused on your daughter. She is the sickest person in this room." That really surprised me because, of course, she didn't look sick. The doctor went on to explain that he was a pediatric electrophysiologist. I had never heard of that before. An electrophysiologist is someone who studies the electrical system of the heart. That's what gives us the heartbeat. Pediatric electrophysiologist is, of course, someone who studies the electrical system of children's hearts. Now, I'd later learn if we took all the pediatric electrophysiologists in the world and put them into this auditorium, you'd have a lot of empty seats. So the fact that there was a pediatric electrophysiologist at Duke University Hospital when my daughter shows up is basically miraculous, because what would have otherwise happened is that she would have seemed to have stabilized in a few days. They would have sent her home with us, and then a few weeks later, or a few months later, or maybe in a year later, we would have come over to her crib one morning, and she just would have been dead. But this doctor knew what was going on. He told me my daughter has something called long QT syndrome. Long QT syndrome is an incurable, sudden arrhythmatic death syndrome, which is as terrible as it sounds. It basically means my daughter's heart can go into an arrhythmia that can kill her at basically any moment. The name long QT actually comes from what's called the QT interval. It is the start of the Q wave to the end of the T wave. It's basically how long it takes for your heart to reset itself in preparation for a new heartbeat. Now, in someone with long QT syndrome, their heart takes just a fraction of a second longer to reset itself. And under normal circumstances, that's not a big deal. But under high-stress circumstances like, being born, what can happen is your heart can need to reset itself kind of quickly in order to speed up. And in someone with long QT syndrome, their heart hasn't reset itself yet, and so it will trip over itself. And that'll lead to a nasty arrhythmia with actually a very fancy French name. It's called torsades de pointes. It basically means the bottom chambers of the hearts are actually trying to beat before the top chambers of the heart, which is really bad, right? That's backwards. And so the heart's just sitting there quivering, but it can't contract all the way, so it can't pump blood through the body. That usually leads to seizures and fainting. For some reason, as the doctor explained it to me, my daughter had been going in and out of this arrhythmia, and she wasn't showing any signs of it, and she'd just bring herself out of the arrhythmia. But at some point, that wasn't going to happen anymore, and she was going to go into it for too long, and it was going to kill her unless they intervened manually. And at that point, he kind of gestured to a defibrillator sitting near my daughter, and I guess that was the moment I realized that all these doctors and nurses were standing there because they were prepared to electrocute this little one-day-old baby girl. So at this point, the doctor pauses, and he says, Mr. Dinin, do you have any questions? And of course, I've never been more speechless in my life. And then he continues, and he says, unfortunately, there's one more thing I need to explain. Long QT syndrome is a genetic disease. It's inherited from a parent. Based on what we know about your health background, we're pretty sure that parent is you. I got to tell you, it is a miracle you're still alive. We need to get you to a doctor. So let's recap. I was living my entrepreneurial dream, excited new father, and eating a delicious chicken biscuit. And suddenly I have a daughter with an incurable heart condition that's trying to kill her in that moment. And oh, by the way, I have the same heart condition that should have already killed me and was still going to kill me at any second. The crazy part to me when I think back on this was that all this took less than 5 minutes, and there wasn't any big drama, there wasn't some sort of traumatic event or accident, nothing like you would see in the movies. Basically, a stranger in a white coat told me something about myself that had been true my entire life. Even beyond that, it had been true for my family for generations. Because when you stop and think about it, you realize that this was happening to everyone in my family, which makes sense because we always had the story in my family that people seem to die young of a heart attack, and we thought it was because we like to eat and don't really like to exercise. But apparently that wasn't killing any of us. It was this crazy disease that nobody had ever heard of a generation ago. It was a familial disease that was completely unfamiliar. So since that day, I've done what I can to learn as much as possible about long QT syndrome, and there's a few things I want to share with you. The first is that researchers believe long QT syndrome is a significant cause of sudden infant death syndrome. That's SIDS. You've probably heard of it. It kills thousands of children every year. It's basically doctors' way of telling distraught parents whose kids just died, we have no idea why this seemingly healthy child died. So in that sense, it kind of makes sense that long QT syndrome could be involved because once a child is dead, you wouldn't be able to see the heart rate, you couldn't see the prolonged QT interval, you couldn't see the arrhythmia. So if this is true that long QT syndrome is playing a role in at least some SIDS deaths, and we're pretty sure it is, then the word infant in sudden infant death syndrome is actually it's really problematic because what it does is it tells parents they don't have to worry about their kids once they're over a year old. But the truth is, we need to be worrying about the same thing in older children, we need to be worrying about the same thing in teenagers, we need to be worrying about the same thing in 30-somethings. So for example, anytime you hear about a healthy young athlete dying suddenly on the high school football field, doctors think this could be a case of undiagnosed long QT syndrome. Now those kind of deaths are being triggered by what's called long QT syndrome type 1, in which the arrhythmias come via physical exertion. Mine and my daughter's long QT syndrome is a little different. We have long QT syndrome type 2, which is more rare, more insidious. Our arrhythmias can be triggered through, get this, being startled. So I can literally be scared to death, which is something you probably didn't even know was possible until I just told you that's probably how I'm going to die. So for example, if the fire alarm went off in this room right now, that simple thing could put me into an arrhythmia that could kill me, which is pretty terrifying when you stop to think about it. Kind of makes you not want to get out of bed in the morning. But that's also problematic because a big cause of being startled is being startled awake. So imagine you're fast asleep, your cell phone rings, you jump out of bed to answer it, and if you have long QT syndrome, that puts you into an arrhythmia that kills you. If you're wondering how common this is, well, that type of scenario has almost killed me twice in the past 5 years. So I'm going to say it's a little too common. And when I explain this disease, as I'm doing right here, people usually will say, well, how do you live with this kind of knowledge? And usually what I want to say is it's like living inside of an existential crisis. But no one will have any idea what I mean. So the analogy I've been using recently is that, imagine you're at a restaurant and you're looking at the menu and you're thinking, well, I should probably order the salad because, well, that's the healthy choice. But since I have this disease that could kill me before I walk out of here, I think I'm going to get the bacon cheeseburger with extra bacon. Looks delicious, right? Unfortunately, this is a really problematic way to make decisions. So, I spent my entire professional career working 16-hour days trying to build the next Amazon or Google or Facebook 20 years from now. But how do you convince yourself to do that when you have a disease that could kill you 20 minutes from now? How do you save for retirement when you have a disease that could kill you next week? How do you take a shower in the morning when you have a disease that could kill you this afternoon? How do you live when you're so keenly aware of how you're going to die? And that's I think the cruelest trick of this disease is that at some point you've got to figure out this equation because when you're not dead, you're basically just normal. And that means you have to deal with all the normal things. So I had a new daughter I had to figure out how to care for. I had bills to pay. So eventually, about a month after all this happens, I finally realized I have to get back to work. And so I start by calling the co-founder of my company that I'd basically abandoned for a month. And luckily, he was my best friend, so he was very nice about it. When we had a conversation, he wound up helping me reframe the problem in a way that I honestly hadn't done before, and I think it helped save my life. And so it's that reframing I want to share with all of you. He said, listen, Aaron, I know what you've been dealing with is difficult, but what you have to remember is you have spent the past month talking with doctors, and doctors see the world in terms of sickness and health. But you're an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs see problems as opportunities. So imagine how an entrepreneur would have described all this to you. He would have said, hey, Aaron, I have some amazing news for you. There's this disease, you've probably never heard of it. It is called long QT syndrome. And the first symptom is almost always death. But by some miracle, we have identified that disease within your daughter within hours of her being born. How incredible is that? That never happens. Even though we can't cure it, knowing about it means we can do things to help protect her and give her a much better chance at a longer, happier, healthier life. How amazing is that? Yeah, that sounds way better than what the doctors told me, right? But wait, there's more. Here's the upsell. Long QT syndrome is a genetic disease. It means actually you've had it your entire life. It was almost certainly going to kill you suddenly and very soon, but now, thanks to your daughter, we know about it in you, which means we can do things to help protect you and give you a much better chance at a longer, happier, healthier life. How cool is that? Your daughter, she's like your guardian angel. That's exactly what she is. My daughter saved my life. And by doing that, she has given me an incredible opportunity. It is the opportunity to share our story. Because when I stopped to think about it, I realized, gosh, how many people in this world are just like I was the day my daughter was born? They're living with this crazy disease. They have no idea. And because they don't know about it, it is going to kill them. But now, thanks to my daughter and her amazing heart, I get to do things like this. I get to stand up here and share our story. And by doing that, by sharing our story, I think we can save thousands of lives. How incredible of an opportunity is that? In order to see it, I just had to do what entrepreneurs do, and I had to reframe the problem. But here's the thing, even though I considered myself an entrepreneur, I wasn't able to do that on my own. Someone had to remind me. You know what that tells me? It tells me that this isn't some sort of entrepreneurial superpower. Anyone can do it, they just need a little bit of a reminder. So I hope that's what this story can be for all of you. A reminder that no matter the challenge, listen, I get it, there are some big, incurable challenges in this world. I think there is a way to not just survive, even thrive in spite of those challenges. And it starts by doing what entrepreneurs do in turning big problems into even bigger opportunities. Remembering to do that helped save my life. Maybe someday it'll help save yours. And with that, I see my 15 minutes to talk are up, and I'm still alive. So that's good news, right? It gives me time to do one final thing, which is tell all of you how much I appreciate this incredible opportunity to share mine and my daughter's story. So, from the bottom of our messed up, broken, amazing hearts, thank you.